Black walnuts, a spectacular wild edible. There's a reason that squirrels and other critters work and fight so hard to procure these fall gifts. By weight, black walnuts are approximately 60% fat, 10% carbohydrate, and 25% protein. A 100 gram serving boasts a whopping 600 calories. Put another way, around 3 cups of nut meat is enough to sustain an active person's daily caloric requirements. And now for a little experiment.
You gonna fit?
Yep. I got a big bag of walnuts, black walnuts that I gathered. And what we're gonna try to do is we're gonna see how long and how many black walnuts it takes to fill up a cup. So we figured if it's the same nutritional content as peanuts, it would be about 1,000 calories. So see how many nuts is 1,000 calories and approximately how long it takes us to process them down from nut form. So yeah, let's get to it, see how long it takes. While these two knuckleheads process down 1,000 calories of black walnuts in the field, let's talk more about what it really takes to make a wilderness living from these delectable nuts. As far as nuts go, black walnuts are not big nuts, but are readily collected and once processed and dried, easily stored for long periods of time. Thus, when they are available, the survivalist, like a busy squirrel preparing for winter, should focus their efforts on collecting as many as possible before it's too late. A quick romp in the forest should produce generous bushels of nuts on a good year. To find ready nuts, watch for them to turn from a solid green to a slightly yellowish green. After frost, nuts will begin to fall from the tree by themselves and can be harvested then. However, it's best to aggressively work them from the tree with a long rod, or by throwing a stick up into the branches. One can also shake the nuts loose by manipulating the base. Nuts mature over 4 to 6 weeks in September and October, so it's important to be watchful or else squirrels will beat you to them. Once collected, the real work begins. With rubber gloves, work and massage the soft outer shell from the outside of the nut. The ink produced by the nuts will quickly stain the skin a dark brown and can irritate thinner skin, so be careful and use protection. Ink that gets under the fingernails is to be avoided for this reason. Wear eye protection if you're a little clumsy working the nuts. And the boys?
We're not counting the moldy ones?
Well,
Nut meat is nut meat.
Still diligently working away. This might take a while.
Oh, gross.
defective nut.
If the nuts are left long enough, the shell turns gooey and easily come off, but there is risk in doing so. If left too long, the black ink, which has a strong odor, may leach into the nut, potentially making it less tasty. It's far easier to remove the husk immediately from the fresh nuts. A knife will help with dried stubborn nuts by scoring the middle and twisting. If you're unlucky, some nuts will be dried out and will need to be worked much harder. This is why it's important to be timely in your nut collecting so that the task is not needlessly made harder. Several methods have been presented to dehull the black walnut, including using a hammer, stomping them with the foot in situ, smashing them in a gunny sack, crushing them with a wooden stomper, and driving over them with a car. The method you use is of little importance and should suit your style. Guys, are you still at it? It appears so. Making a living from wild foods is a very time-consuming and labor-intensive endeavor.
Good ones have lots in them.
Mmm.
There's a pretty good variety of.
A range in quality.
After you have removed the outer husk, it's time to wash your nuts. You can soak your nuts in a basin of water or hose them off. Try to remove as much of the remaining goo as possible. You don't want that to stain your clothing. As an interesting side note, watch how worms react to the runoff from this process. Note that worms, even when soil is wet, will not rise to the surface in daylight. They are reacting to the poison. Black walnuts produce juglone, which is known to be poisonous to many plants. Similarly, this black walnut chemical poison can also be used in primitive fishing by simply dumping the mixture into the water system and collecting affected fish. Careful though, this is illegal in most areas. The chemical is likely produced by the walnut tree to kill off any plants that might attempt to compete against the walnut. Therefore, dump water well away from desirable plants so that they are not harmed. The next step is to protect them from desperate squirrels while allowing them to dry. This is best done by laying them flat on cardboard in a protected area. Allowing them to dry first will help improve their flavor. Let them dry for a few weeks before cracking and freezing the nut meat and freezing them whole in shell. Once shelled, they can also be thoroughly dried and stored. Take it from my experience, squirrels will work very hard to steal from your nutsack. The strong odor the nuts put out is a cue for critters to come from far and wide. I thought I was ingenious enough when I enmeshed my nuts with wire woven tight together. I would later find out that this wasn't enough, even hidden secretly in my shed. Pesky nut thieves would still come. To get better airflow for drying and to keep an eye on my nuts, I hung them high from my balcony. Only a short while later, I noticed, to my dismay, that I had fully lost half of my nuts. Was I going nutty? Then it was obvious a squirrel had found a gap in my sack and was harvesting from my spoils. Having had enough, I then moved my nuts to the attic and spread them out on a sheet of cardboard to continue drying. I felt this was a safer bet to keep my nuts. However, likely lured in by the smell, I caught red-handed a squirrel once again compelled by my nuts. This time it brazenly entered my domicile. From my vantage, think gazing computer forward, a critter bounded to my right flank but only visible in my periphery down a long hallway. It was only a shadow, but the intruder, compelled by a whiff of my nut meat, was headed my way. It was too late to react, and soon it was at my rear, 6 o'clock and cornered. I rightly panicked, jumped from my perch, and found safety in the bathroom bunker at the end of the hall. I peeked out to see the squirrel bounding my way once again. With knob in hand and ready to slam the door shut, the squirrel correctly made a sharp turn and exited from the open door of the balcony. Lesson learned. While collecting and processing walnuts is fairly easy, protecting them from critters isn't. Animals will work hard to take from your stash, and those nuts aren't really yours until they've been consumed. So what's the best way to bust a nut? Simple, just smash your nuts with a hammer or hammer rock to get at the delectable fatty nut meat. While 2 nuts make a handful, they unfortunately produce only a relatively tiny yet delightful snack. Some might find the raw nut taste offensive, but I find them to be quite creamy and rich tasting. However, baked into pie and other desserts can appeal to most and top off the best wild buffet. Keep in mind that not all nut specimens taste exactly alike, so sampling from many nuts will provide a more objective impression. And 15 minutes later, the boys are still at it. So fellow nut busters, what are the results? Okay, full cup, and that took us
15.
say 20 minutes to do the whole thing.
Sure. That's more than a cup.
More than a cup. So about, well, whatever it was, 15 minutes to do a cup, 2 people.
Yep.
That's 40 minutes per person of process time, and I did 40. You did maybe
13, 14. Oh, I did 13 plus some of your 40. One of your 40.
so
It was like 53.
over about 50.
Yeah.
So for daily calories, you'd need triple
3.
that.
Yeah.
So you'd need 150 walnuts per day. Process time would be 3 hours. 2.5
Yeah.
per person. Plus you'd have to collect them. And
Yeah.
I don't know how long it would take to do 150 processed down. It's pretty time consuming. Depending on if you get them at the right time, you can just smash them open, and then it's just a matter of washing them and then drying them out and protecting them, because the squirrels are gonna, if they can steal them, they will.
So you also have to feed a ferret or a guard dog.
Yeah, from the stash.
Yeah.
You convince one squirrel to defend it.
The meanest squirrel on the block.
So there you go. That's an interesting experiment anyway.
Yeah.
So that just goes to show how far nut meats will go, wild nut meats anyway.
Yeah. They're good because they don't spoil very easily, right? Like,
Right. And obviously they can be
they're really
made,
dense.
they can be made portable. Like that wouldn't take, 3 times that volume. You could put in your pocket and carry around all day.
Yeah.
Look at this. You gotta keep picking through here.
Yeah.
Jeez, that's a whole big piece of nut meat. The wildlife will appreciate it.
Yeah, that squirrel's waiting.
Probably more than we will. Maybe just as much.